Fairy Mysteries by Eva Kenas. The second mystery, the Water Goblin. The Detective Council praised Forest Fairy Lindy and Unicorn Max for the successfully closed dragon case. Even though they had disobeyed Alfdis, she told them that it was all right, because good detectives should be a bit stubborn and do unexpected things to solve mysteries. The Dragoness had, meanwhile, found herself a new home in the fairy realm. She chose to live in the fiery mountains along with the other feathered dragons, but she still missed Kian very much and didn't give up on the possibility of seeing him again someday. Lindy also often thought of the boy and the Earth realm. That's why she was elated when, about 7 moons later, she heard the sound of the magic whistle. And since Kian had sworn that he would only use it if he needed her help, she rushed over to the Detective Council's dome straight away to consult her mentors, the light elf Alfdis and the wise cat giants Bennu and Chehu. Even their colleague Siberius had arrived from the sky portal that connected the fairy realm with the feline world in Andromeda. This could be seen in the night sky as a golden spiral, and the cat giants used it to travel freely between their world, the fairy realm, and the human one. "Hello, Lindy," Siberius greeted her with glee. "I heard you made a friend in the Earth realm." "Yes, but that friend seems to be in some trouble now," said Lindy. "The boy is an important ally in the Earth realm," noted Alfdis. "You are meant to help him and his family in many ways, as well as one crucial one that you are not aware of yet." Alfdis paused, and Lindy understood that it was not the time or place to discuss that issue, so she didn't pry and let Alfdis continue speaking. "There is no reason not to let you go back to the Earth realm." In fact, Alfdis turned to the 3 cat giants. "What if Lindy and Max focused mainly on mysteries in the Earth realm? We don't have detectives for that realm yet, and they already proved themselves to be a good team." "You've confirmed our intuition, Alfdis," said Bennu, and Chehu added, "We too sense that there are some important cases that Lindy and Max are about to solve in the Earth realm, but the decision is up to them. What do you think of the idea, Lindy and Max? Would you from now on like to specialize in the Earth realm cases?" Lindy and Max looked at each other. They both agreed, so they nodded. "Splendid!" exclaimed Alfdis. "Then let me give you this." She presented Lindy with a crystal of rainbow hues. "Attach this crystal to your magical staff, as no matter how well the staff is attuned to the elementals and their elements, this crystal will ensure that it's just as powerful in the Earth realm as in ours. Your magic skills are important, but remember to use them only when it's for the benefit of you and everyone involved." "Thank you, Alfdis. I will remember that," promised Lindy, and attached the crystal to the top of her linden staff using a ribbon from her hair. She then gratefully embraced Alfdis, Siberius, and the twin brothers Bennu and Chehu. Soon after, Lindy and Max set off to the linden grove and passed through the sacred portal between the realms. Once they have manifested as their physical Earth realm bodies again, Lindy as a 10-year-old human girl and Max as a golden retriever with a small crystal horn, they headed straight to Kian's home. Kian's family lived in a cottage in the forest, reminiscent of the elven dwellings. It was built into a rock, partially supported by a massive oak tree that grew around it, and it had a simple wooden door framed by colorful flowers and herbs. Lindy was admiring the cottage, and Max was taking an interest in the veggie garden nearby when he noticed some familiar faces behind the kale and cabbages. "Look, they have garden fairies here," he exclaimed, and pointed at a group of 7 beings who were tending the garden. The garden fairies were good-hearted fairy folk who loved to look after vegetables, fruits, and herbs. They lived in both the fairy and the earth realms, but made sure not to be seen by humans and preferred to tend their gardens in secrecy. and if the garden owners were respectful and kind to plants and animals, they looked after their houses as well. The garden fairies were about a quarter of the size of Lindy and had wrinkled, childlike faces. They wore colorful clothes and hats, and their faces were slightly brownish, which is why they were sometimes called brownies, brunies or brutnies, depending on the dialect. However, they preferred to be called garden fairies. The garden fairies were interested in the two visitors from the fairy realm and seemed to recognize that they were a unicorn and a fairy in disguise. But just as Lindy and Max were about to approach them, someone disturbed them and the garden fairies hid behind the cabbages. Lindy and Max turned around and noticed something big and black running at them. Before they could grasp what kind of animal it was, the beast rammed into Lindy's legs and made her tumble. Lindy curled up and covered her head, hoping it wasn't a predator. She peeked through her fingers in apprehension and saw the lively face of a dog similar to Max. She sat up and locked eyes with the beast, who was now beginning to lick her face. Lindy chuckled and watched as the dog moved over to Max to lick him as well. She noticed that the dog was a female. She had strangely long claws and unusually messy hair on her back. Max seemed alarmed by her energy, and he kept trying to escape her constant licking, jumping and clawing. Lindy couldn't help but laugh when she saw the crazy beast following her timid friend. "How do you like Mera?" a voice called out. Lindy recognized the boy's voice and turned to face him with a smile. "Hello, Kian." Kian smiled back and approached her, explaining how the dog came to him. "She just showed up here a few moons back, and we have become inseparable." "She's so cute and so wild," said Lindy. "Completely untamable," admitted Kian, as they watched Max trying to shake off Mera, who wouldn't stop jumping at him. "Would you calm down, please?" complained Max, not realizing that his grumpiness would provoke an even more enthusiastic response. Max enjoyed his dog buddy to a certain degree, but his noble unicorn spirit couldn't understand Mera's wild nature. Lindy observed Mera with scrutiny because she seemed familiar to her. "Where do you come from, Mera?" she asked. Mera looked at her but didn't reply. "Strange, she doesn't want to talk to me," said Lindy, to which Max replied, "She might not even know what a conversation is. She's too primal." Mera responded by simultaneously growling and licking his face, which made both Lindy and Kian laugh. "Mera's in love," called out Kian. Max raised a brow and looked tentatively at Mera's glowing face. It was the last thing that a professional detective like him needed during an investigation, a lovesick dog. Kian turned to Lindy and said, "Thank you for coming to help us." Lindy noticed that Kian's happy face had suddenly changed. He seemed worried, so she asked, "What happened, Kian? Why did you call us here?" "It's my parents," he said with a sigh. "They just took off one day without saying a word, and I have not seen them since." "Have you no idea where they went?" asked Lindy. Kian shook his head. "It's so unlike them. They always tell me where they are going and when they'll be back." "Do you have any neighbors?" asked Lindy. "No," replied Kian. "My parents chose this place because it was away from the other human settlements. They both prefer to live in the company of animals and plants." Lindy noticed that one of the female garden fairies was watching them curiously from behind the cabbages. Lindy guessed she knew something, so she smiled at her and asked, "Hi, lovely, do you know anything that could help us?" The garden fairy was about to reply, but was startled when Kian looked her way, and she disappeared before he could see her. "Who were you talking to?" asked Kian. Max's eyes bored into Lindy's, and he shook his head to warn her. The garden fairies didn't want Kian to know they were living there, and they had to respect that. "To Mera," she said, though she hated lying to him. "She's still not responding to me, though." At the mention of her name, Mera stopped licking Max and lifted her ears, with her tongue still hanging out. She came running at Lindy, crashed into her, and sat on her foot. Despite being uncomfortable, Lindy let her be, as she was so innocent and cute. While patting Mera's proudly raised chest, Lindy turned to Max and said, "Could you use your magical horn to receive a vision?" Max lifted his head to the sky and focused on the sun rays that were charging his little unicorn horn. "That's strange," he mused. "I see 2 fish." Lindy relayed what Max had said to Kian, who couldn't communicate with animals as she did. Kian was confused by the vision. "Do you see anything else, Max?" asked Lindy for Kian. "Only a fog. My inner sight is so blurred in this realm, it's frustrating." Mera licked him for comfort and shifted her heavy, clumsy body over to sit on his paw instead of Lindy's foot. Max sighed. "And it's not easy to concentrate here either." Max turned away from Mera, so she licked his back instead. "Would you please get a grip, dog lady?" complained Max and shook his head in disbelief. "How can one dog produce so much saliva?" Lindy smiled at his grumpiness and explained to Kian that their magic was not as powerful in the Earth realm. "What kind of magic do you know, Lindy?" asked Kian. "I have a magical linden staff. It's attuned to the spirits of the elements called the elementals," said Lindy as she waved her staff. "Maybe one day I can demonstrate its magic to you." "Can humans shift over to your realm?" asked Kian. "I'm not sure. Humans are generally not invited into our realm, as they are much denser in both body and spirit. We can easily put on your bodies like suits because we are made of light, but it doesn't work the other way around. So you'd have to learn to slip in and out of your physical body and preserve it over here while you visit our realm, which is quite difficult to do." Kian sighed. "I understand. It's just that, for a moment, I thought that my parents might have disappeared into your realm." Lindy gave him a sympathetic smile. "I'm afraid we'll have to focus on this realm to find them. However, since there are no clues or signs to follow around here, all we can do is head over to the forest and ask the local animals if they have seen them." Max agreed with the plan, and so they prepared to go. Kian decided to stay behind in case his parents returned, but Mera insisted on coming along with them. "Why don't you go back home, Mera?" asked Lindy. "Kian needs you there." "Plus you'd scare off all the forest animals," added Max, "and we really need to talk with them." But Mera pretended not to listen and stubbornly ran ahead anyway. She was even wilder in the forest, just as Max had assumed, and all the local animals retreated into their dens or nests upon hearing her approach. Mera didn't care though, as she was simply enjoying herself, especially because she could make others fall just by ramming into them. She did that to both Lindy and Max a few times before they learned to hide behind a tree each time she came running at them. "We will not be able to investigate properly with her tagging along," complained Max to Lindy. "It's unprofessional. We can't even call it an investigation. It's involuntary babysitting of a wild dog." Lindy chuckled. "I know, Max. Come on. We need to get on without her." Lindy beckoned to Max. They were still not far from Kian's home, so they knew that she would find her way back if they left her. After wandering around for a while, Lindy and Max met a majestic stag grazing on some moss. Deer inhabited both the fairy and the earth realms, so Lindy assumed it would be a good animal to ask. The stag was startled when he saw them and sniffed the air, trying to recognize what kinds of beings they were. Lindy nudged Max to address him because all animals loved unicorns. Max walked over to the stag, but the timid animal didn't recognize the unicorn in his dog disguise and started to gallop away. "Wait!" called out Max and let out a typical unicorn neigh, which was gentler and more melodic than that of a standard horse. The stag stopped and turned back to Max. "Would you please take a moment to talk with us, noble stag?" asked Max. The stag wavered and shifted his gaze to Lindy. "She's also not who you think," explained Max. "She's a forest fairy, the daughter of a tree elf and a faun." The stag observed Lindy for a moment, then walked toward them gracefully. "All right, strange unicorn dog and a human fairy," he said. "What do you wish to discuss with me?" "We are looking for Kian's parents. Do you know them?" asked Max. "You mean the family from the cottage that the garden fairies look after? I know them. They are kind. They never hurt us." "Do you recall when you saw them last?" asked Lindy. Mused the stag. "That would be a long time ago, but I would ask the squirrels if I were you. They are such busybodies, they never miss a thing." "All right. Thank you for your time, Mr. Stag," said Lindy, and Max let out one more unicorn neigh to show the stag his gratitude. The stag nodded to them and resumed his grazing. As they walked on, Lindy spotted a squirrel in the tree crown above and called out, "Hello, beautiful squirrel. Have you by any chance seen a human couple around here?" "No," replied the squirrel. "I hide each time I see a human being because some of them hunt us for our fur." Lindy and Max understood. They thanked the squirrel and walked on. Soon they met a quail and approached it with the same question. The quail had a curious answer for them. "I saw a human couple around here last night. They were heading toward the pond." Lindy turned to Max in surprise. "You saw two fish with your inner sight, Max. They must still be somewhere by the pond." They were about to ask where the pond was, but the quail had already flown away. Then a frog jumped up from the bubbling spring nearby and said, "If they went to the pond, they may have been taken by the water goblin, the half-man, half-frog creature who lives in the mud beneath the water. He used to be one of the good goblins, the hobgoblins as we call them around here, but that was before he developed a bitterness towards humans. I don't blame him, as they spread nasty rumors about him and his kind. Humans do tend to be silly when it comes to their superstitions. You know that some of them kiss us because they believe we will change into charming princes?" Lindy smiled at the thought and said, "Well, prince or no prince, you look quite charming as you are, Mr. Frog." "I like to think so," asserted the frog proudly. "And could you tell us where the pond is?" asked Max. The frog hesitated. "It's quite far from here, and I'm not good with directions." "Perhaps we should ask Kian to take us there," suggested Lindy. "He must know where it is." Max agreed with her. They thanked the frog and set out on the path back to Kian's cottage. "We must be wary of water goblins," said Max on the way. "They are peculiar, moody creatures, especially when they have taken a dislike to someone." On the way back through the forest, Lindy sensed danger in the air, but little did she know that the danger had eyes that were peering through the nearby shrubs. The eyes were glowing red and belonged to the faces of two goblins. The red-eyed goblins were more devious than the water goblins, as they lived only to make trouble. Of all the beings in the world tree, they despised the fairy folk the most. So whenever someone from the fairy realm crossed over, they made it their mission to chase them away. As Lindy and Max neared Kian's cottage, they found Mera awaiting them with an offended look. She was obviously upset that they had left her behind in the forest. "I'm sorry, Mera, but you were scaring off all the animals," explained Lindy. Mera growled a bit, weighing something up, and finally just ran to greet them. Max let her lick his face, and Lindy stroked her. "Why don't you want to talk to us, Mera?" asked Lindy. "You seem so familiar to me." Mera was about to say something when Kian disturbed them. "Lindy, Max, you're back so soon!" He ran to them, impatient to hear what they had to say. "We do have a lead," said Lindy. "A man and a woman were seen going to the pond." Kian pondered this. "That's strange. My parents never go to the pond as they fear the water goblin." "It may have been another couple, but it's the only clue we have so far," said Lindy. "We should at least try to investigate it. Would you take us there?" Kian nodded, and they set off. As they left, Lindy noticed the garden fairies peeping out of the veggie patches. The one who had wanted to tell her something earlier waved at her, then placed both her palms on her heart. Lindy did the same because she thought the garden fairy liked her and she wanted to reciprocate. However, the garden fairy shook her head and once again pressed her palms against her heart, trying to convey a message. Lindy still didn't know what to make of it, though. Meanwhile, Kian was watching as Mera teased Max by running after him and jumping at him. "They make such a lovely couple," he remarked to Lindy. "I like that she's coal-black and he's golden white. My parents say that opposites attract." Lindy noticed the worry in Kian's face when he mentioned his parents, and she tried to reassure him. "Don't worry, Kian, we will find them." Kian responded with a wan smile. He wanted to believe it was so. Soon the four friends reached a small pond surrounded by willows. Max began sniffing about, and so did Mera, but they caught no whiff of a human other than Kian. "If I'm not mistaken, the water goblins come out in the moonlight," said Lindy with a look at Max. "Yes," confirmed Max. "They like to climb trees and watch the stars." "Then I suppose all we can do is wait until the moon replaces the sun in the sky," said Lindy, and turned around with concern in her eyes. Once again she could feel someone's presence nearby. She assumed it was the water goblin. But it wasn't. Not far away in a thicket, the two red-eyed goblins were spying on the group. "Oh, how I hate the fairy folk," whispered the taller goblin. The shorter goblin agreed with him. "Me too. And the unicorns are even worse. They have too much light." "We can't let them roam these lands helping everyone," said the taller goblin. "But what should we do?" asked the shorter one. "Well, hopefully our friend in the pond will do the same thing to them as he did to the human couple." The taller goblin grinned silently at the shorter one, and they watched as Lindy and Kian settled down in the grass, waiting for the dusk. Lindy was holding on to her magical linden staff in case she needed it. She kept checking her rainbow crystal attached to the top, hoping that what Alfdis had said was true, and that the gem made her staff as powerful in the earth realm as it was in the fairy realm. Max, meanwhile, was scrutinizing the area around the pond, still looking for a clue or sign. Mera kept nudging him to pay her some attention, though, so he couldn't concentrate very well. Once the sky had dimmed, the four heroes noticed the surface of the pond was rippling. Soon after, a green head emerged from the water. It was the water goblin, a creature with humanoid features and frog skin, hands and feet. He rose quietly out of the water, wearing a green coat and brown pants. As if by magic, his clothes became instantly dry when he reached the land, and he jumped easily onto one of the willows and started to search among its branches. He pulled out a pipe and some matches. He lit the pipe and puffed on it while admiring the full moon and the clear, starlit sky. Lindy and her friends hid behind a nearby hedgerow and discussed what to do next. "Should we approach him?" asked Max, but Lindy shook her head. "Let's watch from afar and see what he does." "What if he disappears and we don't get a second chance?" argued Kian. "Trust me, Kian," said Lindy. "It's not good to rush into things when it comes to creatures such as the water goblins." Although Kian was impatient, he took her advice and stayed put. They watched as the water goblin enjoyed his pipe, blowing the smoke upward and startling the fireflies that flew around the pond. Everything was peaceful and still until Mera began to scratch herself behind the ear. Max, Lindy and Kian turned to her in disbelief, and she gaped back at them, not comprehending what she had done wrong. Then they heard a plop and looked over the hedgerow to find that the water goblin was gone. Finally, Kian's restlessness became unbearable, so he emerged from hiding and called out, "Hey, water goblin, what did you do to my parents?" Lindy tried to hold him back, but Kian marched over to the edge of the pond. He gazed at the water until bubbles formed on the surface. The water goblin's head rose from the water, and he glowered at Kian with his green eyes. Lindy stepped out of hiding to help him, followed by Mera and Max. The water goblin was startled by Kian's companions and wavered about what to do next, but Lindy addressed him with a kind voice. "Don't be afraid, Mr. Water Goblin. We come in peace. My friend is just upset because his parents have gone missing. Have you by any chance seen a human couple around here?" The water goblin's head rose higher above the surface, revealing his lips, bright red against the green tone of his skin. He answered in a raspy voice. I hadn't seen anybody around till you disturbed my evening pipe. I'm tired of you humans assuming that I'm the villain, when in fact you are the biggest brutes in this world. Humans have killed so many water goblins out of stupid prejudice. I understand where you're coming from, Lindy assured him. Nevertheless, Kian and his parents are good humans. They live in harmony with this land and never hurt anyone. Well, as I said, I hadn't seen anyone until you disturbed me. And if you have any manners, you will leave now. How would you like it if I came to your home uninvited and disrupted your peace? Lindy could sense that Kian was going to say something imprudent, so she gestured at him to be quiet. I understand. We will be on our way then. Lindy waved at her friends to follow her, and the water goblin watched them cautiously until they disappeared behind the hedgerow. Only then did he grin and sink beneath the surface. I don't trust him, whispered Kian to Lindy. Neither do I, Lindy agreed. Max, we could really use your inner sight now. Max lifted his head to the sky and, as there was no sunshine, focused on the moon to empower his crystal horn. After a moment he opened his eyes and said, I see the same image as before, 2 fish. Lindy relayed his vision to Kian, then let Max concentrate on more inner guidance. Oh no, cried Max, now I see Kian's mum. Her human eyes have turned into fish eyes, so she's one of the 2 fish. Lindy gasped and quickly turned to Kian, who was keen to know what else Max could see. Max thinks that the water goblin turned your mum into a fish, and the same has probably happened to your dad. What a fiend, roared Kian. He was about to run back to the pond, but Lindy pulled him back in time. Wait, don't do anything rash, she urged. I need to rescue them straight away, insisted Kian, so Lindy tried to reason with him some more. The water goblin could turn you into a fish too, and then you wouldn't be able to help them at all. Our magic is more powerful than the goblins. Trust us. Lindy and Max nodded at each other and headed for the pond, determined to claim Kian's parents back using their magic. Kian and Mera followed them, watching their every move with curiosity. Lindy approached the pond's edge and dipped her linden staff into the water. She closed her eyes in concentration before she uttered her magic spell. Water elementals, I ask you for help. If you agree with my plan, may your element respond to my plea. Next, Lindy lifted her staff and twirled it in the air, pronouncing, Air elementals, I ask you for help as well. If you agree with my plan, may your element respond to my plea. At first the wind just grazed the pond's surface, but then it began to blow more strongly. The air elementals were working with the water elementals. Lindy smiled at Max as her magical linden staff had proven that it could work as well in that realm. As the wind blew harder, it created a surge. The waves crashed against the edge of the pond, which angered the water goblin. He leapt out of the pond and started toward Lindy, who was now pointing her staff at him, warning. Stay where you are, water goblin. We know you have the human couple. Release them from your spell. The water goblin hissed through his teeth. I take no orders from anyone. He made a swift motion with his hand, and the water responded, creating a giant wave that rose high above Lindy. And a body of water manifested in front of her, spreading its arms to show off its power. Stand back, Lindy, cried Max. He has created a water demon. Lindy backed away from the pond as the water demon came at her at an incredible speed. Kian held his cheeks in fear, but just when it looked as if the demon would grasp Lindy and engulf her, the earth began to shake. It was because of Lindy's magical staff. She was stamping it firmly on the ground, summoning her friends. Earth elementals, I ask you for help. If you agree with my plan, may your element respond to my plea. The water goblin panicked as the ground trembled and the water demon began to quiver. Lindy managed to escape before the water demon collapsed onto the bank. The soil quickly absorbed its shape and size and hungrily soaked up the water that was left behind. The water goblin was intimidated by the girl, especially when he realized she was not finished with her magic just yet. Lindy began stamping her staff on the ground even more fiercely, and then lifted it swiftly toward the stars. "Fire elementals, I ask you for help. If you agree with my plan, please join the earth elementals." The ground kept on shaking and rattling the pond from beneath, and as the quake intensified, the stars responded by sending down bolts of lightning. The water goblin covered his head and jumped back into the pond to hide. Lindy stopped stamping her staff, and her eyes met with Max's. Then she turned to Kian and Mera, who were both mesmerized by her skills. They were all waiting for what would happen next because they sensed that the water goblin was not done fighting. As the stars stopped shooting down firebolts, the ground calmed, the water was appeased, and the wind became a breeze. The heroes held their breath, and just when the tension had reached its peak, the water goblin jumped out of the pond holding 2 fish in his frog hands. He bore his sharp teeth and warned, "If you don't leave, I will devour them right here and right now." Kian was horrified at the sight of the water goblin's teeth nearing one of the fish, and so he roared, "Stop! Don't hurt them! I will do anything you want. Just don't hurt them, please." Lindy and Max looked at each other in despair. They were both out of ideas and feared the worst. At that moment, Lindy recalled the female garden fairy placing her hands on her heart and finally realized what it meant. She was advising her to work with the 5th element. "Let's call upon the 5th element," whispered Lindy to Max, and his eyes brightened at the idea. He rose on his hind legs like a unicorn, directed his crystal horn at the moon, and focused on its magic. The water goblin didn't understand what was happening because he had never encountered a unicorn disguised as a dog before. Max let the moonlight charge his horn, then pointed it at the goblin. A ray of silvery white light shot out of his horn straight into the water goblin's heart. Kian and Mera couldn't believe their eyes as they watched the water goblin's body fill with rainbow-like light, the impact making him quiver uncontrollably. At last, he let go of the fish and raised his frog hands in the air. He grimaced under the weight of his guilt. The purifying light had filled his heart and made him understand the harm he had done. He covered his mouth in shock as his gaze fell upon the 2 fish flapping around in the mud. They were slowly losing their lives. He began to whisper something in an ancient goblin language and released them from his spell. As a result, Kian's parents were transformed from fish back to their original form. Kian and Mera rushed over to the confused couple who were coughing out water and trying to become accustomed to their human bodies again. The water goblin jumped back into the pond, hiding his bad conscience under its surface. Lindy and Max smiled at each other, surprised at how strong their magic was when they united. While Lindy had summoned the 4 elementals and their elements, Max was able to reach the 5th, most mysterious element that unites all the realms and beings through the universal power of love. If darkness had contaminated a being's heart, the light would chase it away, unless the darkness had already overcome its soul, which was not the case for the water goblin. Lindy embraced Max happily, but they both fell when Mera rammed into them. Her heavy, ungainly body pinned them to the ground, and she started to lick them madly all over their faces. She was so grateful and happy that they had saved Kian's parents. And while they all celebrated the reunion, the 2 red-eyed goblins watched them from afar with frustration. "I thought the water goblin was one of us," complained the taller one. He has deeply disappointed me, responded the shorter one. And what's even worse, now the humans will spread glory about those two. We could lead them to the marshland, suggested the taller one, to the witch. Oh yes, agreed the shorter one. Let's make it their next case. They clapped their hands with malicious joy and snuck away before anybody noticed them. On the way back home, Kian's parents explained what had happened to them. The water goblin found himself smitten with Kian's mum and wanted to make her his wife. So, using an ancient magic spell, he hypnotized her while she was asleep and lured her to his pond. Kian's dad followed her as she sleepwalked out of the cottage, but was afraid to wake her up, as he knew that it was not good to wake a sleepwalker. He kept his distance, gently calling his wife back until he met the water goblin who had been waiting for her. The two started to fight, which woke Kian's mum. She was in shock at first, but when she realized what was going on, she attempted to help her husband and fought the water goblin along with him. Unfortunately, at that moment, the water goblin used his magic and turned them both into fish. He didn't have the heart to let them die, though, so he took them to his pond and kept them down there as prisoners. When the reunited family neared their cottage, Kian's mum embraced Lindy and said, "We can't thank you enough for all that you have done for our family, Lindy. We know it was you who brought Kian home to us after the dragon kidnapped him." Lindy smiled and said, "It was not just me. Max is the best detective partner you could have." Kian's parents looked at Max, who gave them a friendly yawn, which meant he agreed. "So you two are detectives?" asked Kian's dad. "Yes, but that is all we can disclose," said Lindy with a conspirational wink at Kian. "We should celebrate," exclaimed Kian's mum. "Come with us, Lindy and Max. Let's have a hot meal and finally enjoy a good night's sleep." She beckoned for everyone to come along. Mera was excited at the thought of food, and so she sped home right away. Lindy and Max joined them for some soup, but snuck out of the cottage soon after everyone had fallen asleep. The skies were already lightening when they left the cozy forest cottage. The garden fairies came out to say goodbye to them, and the one who had given Lindy the important message even blew them a kiss. Lindy waved at them, and Max gave his unicorn neigh before they set off on the forest path that took them back to the linden grove. Once Lindy and Max were back in their realm, they went straight to the Detective Council's dome. They were excited to report on another successfully closed case in the Earth realm. The cat giants, Bennu and Chehu, greeted them at the entrance. "Lindy, Max, you are back already," called out Chehu. "Alfdis has travelled through the Celestial Gate. She's in Andromeda, helping Cyberius and the other cat giants to solve a case." "Then we'll share the good news with you, our beloved mentors," said Lindy, enjoying a welcoming embrace in their fluffy arms. "We found Kian's parents. The whole family is back together and safe." The cat giants smiled at Lindy, and when they turned to Max, they saw that he was a little distracted. "Are you all right, Max?" "Yes, I'm just thinking of Kian's dog, Mera," said Max. Lindy grinned at him and teased, "Now you will miss her, won't you?" "Yes, especially the jumping," replied Max sarcastically. "But really, I wonder who she is. She's unlike any other dog I have ever encountered." "I suppose it's time to tell them," said Bennu and turned to Chehu for permission to explain. "She's not a dog, you see. She's the dragoness that you brought here a few moons ago. She left this realm to reunite with Kian, and inspired by Max, she chose the dog disguise. She made us promise we wouldn't tell you, as she was worried you would try to stop her." "That makes so much sense," mused Lindy. "That's why she had such long claws and messy hair on her back." "It certainly explains a lot," agreed Max. And as he recalled her fiery energy, he actually did begin to miss her a bit. He would not He would not admit to anyone, though, at least not yet. Unicorns were known for being shy and reserved, and they let close only those they could really trust. The fairy folk were also careful about whose company they kept, which was another reason why Lindy and Max understood each other so well.